And call into order the Town Council study session on February 3rd, 2026. And with that, I'm not quite sure who I'm turning it over to. Erica, are you taking the lead?
I will start us off, yes.
Awesome.
All right. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. We are very excited to be with you all tonight to talk trash. This is a conversation that has been evolving for a few years at this point. I'm really excited to get into the details. It has a lot of opportunities for the town. And we'd also love to entertain your questions as we go through the presentation. We do have quite a bit of time to discuss, so please feel free to chime in with questions as we share these slides. And then also we'll have time at the end for further discussion as well. So we are here to talk about extended producer responsibility. So initially, we're going to talk about a bit of the waste overview for the town of Erie and what's pertinent to the extended producer responsibility specifically. We're going to talk about EPR, extended producer responsibility. Full disclosure, there's a lot of acronyms in this presentation, so we're going to do our best to define them, and then we'll probably use the shorthand, but if you have questions, want a reminder, please let us know. We did talk about bringing a dry erase board and actually having them defined because there's so many. So just full disclosure, it's a bit hard to follow at times. We're going to talk about how EPR affects Erie, specifically our HOAs, our residents, the town, and facilities. And then we want to have a good discussion with you all about questions you may have and kind of what would be helpful from your perspective on bringing EPR to you on a regular basis and how it's evolving over time. And then next steps, specifically with this first phase of EPR. So waste overview. So the image on the left, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. So a quick overview, there's 5 residential haulers within the town. That's One Way, Republic, Waste Connections, Western Disposal, and WM, which is Waste Management. There's also 2 boutique compost haulers, so Wampost, which has recently merged with Compost Colorado, and Scraps. Scraps primarily does commercial hauling, and definitely in the old town, downtown Briggs Street area, and it's relatively new. And then we also have, historic landfills. We have the closed Denver Regional North and Denver Regional South, as well as the operational Front Range landfill, as you all know much about. This bottom image is from our retrack data, and this is from 2024. And you can see in green, it's the municipal solid waste, or MSW. We have red recycling, blue organics, and then light blue is reuse. We don't have reuse being reported currently, but that could change in the future. And per our ordinance that was adopted in March of 2020, we require that haulers in Erie are licensed through Boulder County. And because of that, we have this data that you see at the bottom through retrack and access to that information.
So I'm sorry.
No.
Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
In too. So even haulers that are hauling on the Weld County side, they need to be registered with Boulder County?
Yes.
Okay, and then is there an agreement or an MOU or something between Boulder and Weld?
No, it is through the ordinance that was adopted in March 2020, is my understanding. We are requiring them to license through Boulder County.
Got it.
And that's a conversation we can have later too, is if we want to have them be licensed through Erie specifically, so that we could do something such as require their participation in this program in EPR.
I believe that was the initial intent, but of course, March of 2020, immediately after passing this ordinance, the world fell apart. So it was only partially enacted. We had bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Good context. So the left image is from the 2023 community survey results, and the top bar there is the most important for this conversation, but basically 89% of residents in 2023 had access to trash and recycling curbside. That's important to share because that 89% of residents have access to free recycling through EPR starting this year. It's also important because there's 11% of folks in Erie that do not have trash curbside pickup that could also have, or excuse me, not trash, but recycling, that could also have access to recycling now for free through this program. The image on the right is from an informal questionnaire that we ran from our division. And the important piece is at the bottom, 70% of respondents said they don't know that currently, and I need to look at the image. Can you read to me what it
It
says?
says, I pay as part of my HOA fee, so I'm unsure.
So 70% don't know what they're paying to date because it's managed by their HOA. We also saw in that same informal questionnaire that about 70% of respondents were interested in organics if it wasn't significantly more than what they pay now. And then we saw a similar amount just don't know what they pay now because it's bundled into their HOA dues and that contract is managed by their HOA. So again, an important piece because a large part of this is going to be communicating to HOAs that they need to establish what they pay now for recycling so that they can get that reimbursed by the end of this year.
Right, so could we expect that our costs for garbage collection would go down, or?
That would be the idea, yeah. And a big part of that at the end we'll talk about is really identifying what is the cost today so that you can say, hey, we pay $4 of our $10 bill for recycling. That's covered by the state through this EPR program. We need to be reimbursed for that for 2026 and moving forward that should be paid for. It's also an opportunity to maybe add on additional services, bulky item pickups, yard waste collection, compost collection, additional things that maybe you could advocate for with your hauler.
So when you say we get paid for, it would be each HOA going and applying to get reimbursed for it?
Not exactly. We'll get to that in a sec. We might answer that question here in a second.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I did not introduce myself, nor Emma. So Emma, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Emma Marino. I'm one of the sustainability and water conservation specialists.
Thanks, Emma.
All right. So extended producer responsibility, or EPR, as we will likely continue to refer to it as, originated as House Bill 22-1355, which is the Producer Responsibility Program for Statewide Recycling Act, and it was signed into law in June of 2022. And within this, it sets up a producer responsibility program that requires that companies that sell products and packaging to fund a statewide recycling system to recycle those materials, which is, think of like your Coca-Colas, consumer good companies, they create the things that have to be recycled. So now they have to pay into a fund that offsets the cost of that recycling. And so some of those companies were required to then form an independent nonprofit, which is called a Producer Responsibility Organization, or PRO. We're adding into the alphabet soup. We're adding in, whose role is to help coordinate, fund, and manage the statewide recycling program. So in Colorado, Circular Action Alliance was appointed as that organization. But for more context, there's over 60 producer responsibility programs throughout the world, and there's 7 states, including Colorado, that have adopted this type of program or are in the process of rolling it out. And for many of them, Circular Action Alliance, or CAA, is the producer responsibility organization. Next, please. The overall goal of EPR is to help make recycling as convenient as trash service and gradually introduce free recycling for residents, with more improvements rolling out over time. The program covers packaging and paper products and will have a standardized list of recycled materials that will be collected statewide. So no matter where you go, you'll know that you can always recycle XYZ materials, and then as those systems improve, they'll be able to add more materials as well. So in regions like the Front Range, where we have a lot that we can recycle, it won't change too much for us, but in more rural areas of the state, they'll be able to start accessing those materials where they might not have them currently. And overall benefits for the state include less landfill waste, no cost recycling services, and local business growth and education for residents as the program grows as well. Okay, we've got a graph, we've got some acronyms. So as the Producer Responsibility Organization, Circular Action Alliance, or CAA, is responsible for developing and implementing a program plan for managing covered products. The program plan was presented to the state, and it's gone through a number of iterations, being reviewed by their advisory board, many 3-hour-long meetings, multiple times a week, lots of Zoom calls. But the state was able to adopt the program plan at the end of 2025 to help with the 2026 start date. But looking at this diagram, we have the flow. So in the gray, that's where we'll start. Producers first had to register with the state to identify that they were a producer of these materials, and then begin to pay dues as a result of the materials that they create. So if something's really easily recyclable, they pay less. If it's really difficult to recycle, they pay more. So it also incentivizes that they're packaging things that are more easily recyclable.
Who sets what they pay?
That comes from Circular Action Alliance. Yep. And we do have, go ahead.
And would Amazon be one of the producers?
Yep. Yes.
Maybe the biggest or?
I don't know.
And the interesting part of this is it is fluid in a lot of ways, but the producers are incentivized to use products that are easier to recycle, and they're de-incentivized to use products that are not. So like pouches, flexible plastics, those are more difficult to collect and harder to recycle. That's going to be an additional cost for them, right? Versus like corrugated cardboard or some of our standard number plastics. Those are going to be cheaper for them to be able to recycle. So it's an interesting kind of market structure.
Which is, EPR is very nebulous. In some ways, it's becoming less nebulous, but a lot of the actions are more related to producers than to municipalities, than to residents. So we just wanted to give you all an overview kind of where everything's falling, but not everything will be directly related to us as the town. So moving into the blue, we have covered entities, which is where recycling services then are able to be provided to covered entities at no cost. So something that they say a lot in the CAA calls is this will be a knob, not a switch. So we will slowly begin to see the reimbursements come out. We'll slowly see more materials covered, but it didn't turn 2026 and now everybody has free recycling. That'd be cool, but that's unrealistic. So it starts with residential services, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more of how we fall into that as well. But right now it looks like the offset of cost will begin to be seen mid to late 2026. So we'll keep you all informed as we know more about that. But then moving into the yellow part of the diagram, a big piece of EPR is education and outreach. So it's still to be determined, but municipalities are expected to get $2 to $3 per household to help with education and outreach costs, which will be cool. And they will also be doing a streamlined education campaign as well. So they have all these funny, like a little bit cheeky, like recycling as clear as Hanging Lake on a summer's day, like things like that are relevant to Colorado, so people can engage with it and have a more localized, oh, like I know what that means, or there's a funny one about beer, you know, Colorado things. And then we look at the collection, so services that are provided by governments, etc. Post-collection, meaning there will be investment into more material recovery facilities or MRFs. So that way, again, across the state, there's that infrastructure to process these materials that are then collected. Eventually, there will be a phasing in of compost facilities, and then looking into end markets as well to make sure that these products go where they can be used and reprocessed. REM on end markets is responsible end markets, and then PCR is post-consumer recycled materials. So again, an incentive for them to use these materials that are then being collected as well. And this is just a handy little graphic from Circular Action Alliance about how this program will work. So again, it starts with the producer responsibility. We'll have a centralized statewide system to ensure everyone has access, lots of education and outreach. Overall, we'll experience innovation and improvement, which will be iterative as the program rolls out because things will change. We might encounter something and they might have to pivot. But overall, we'll be expanding access and services to Coloradans to make sure that everyone can recycle. Okay, that was really high up. Now, more specifically, what does this mean for Erie? So you all are aware, we'll receive reimbursement for the town recycling center for the materials that are currently on the covered materials list, which right now, it's just single stream recycling, so your cans, bottles, jugs, and jars, and the cardboard. And then in the future, again, in the phases of the plan as the knob begins to turn, we'll also receive reimbursement for the single stream recycling that's collected at town facilities as well. And again, we'll likely receive $2 to $3 per household to support education and outreach. And we've been speaking with the Boulder County Resource Conservation Division and EcoCycle on ways we can best leverage their resources, so that way we have consistent materials across the region. And then what Erica was alluding to a little bit before, as far as residents and HOAs, confirming that your hauler will plan to participate. Haulers are not required to participate. So you can just put out a feeler, see if they are interested in receiving that funding for you. And then confirm what you pay for recycling to date. Again, if you pay $10 a month, you know 4 of that's for recycling, you can then advocate, hey, once you have funding, I expect to see that cost offset because I know you can receive money from the state. And with that offset of cost, it might be an opportunity to explore yard waste or organics collection at your home or within your community. Our division also offers waste diversion rebates, so if you need a little extra push, we have funding available to help try out compost or organics collection at home as well. And again, recycling reimbursement may not be seen until mid to late 2026. So as we know more, we'll share that with you all.
All right, so if I wanted to compost at home, there's money to kind of jumpstart. Oh, how does that work?
Yeah, so for our waste diversion rebates for compost specifically, we have a couple different options. So if you sign up for curbside through Wampost/Compost Colorado, since they merged, we just ask that you do a 6-month subscription that's new. So if you already have it, we cannot rebate you for it. But if you start a new 6-month, they do, I think it's a 5 or 6 gallon bucket, or you can do the 32 gallon cart. We'll reimburse you for that. It comes through on your water bill. And then we also have a couple like in-home composter options as well. So it's all on our website.
Okay,
And that is funded through the collected bag fees.
Yep.
For the town.
okay. So it's not part of the larger program here.
No.
And nor does it like come out of our general fund. Like it's not from, the residents aren't paying taxes into this. It's when you get a paper sack at Walmart.
Yeah.
And you gotta pay 10 cents. That doesn't go to Walmart. It comes back to local governments to facilitate waste diversion.
They get part of it. They get part of it and we get the other part, and then
Just to be clear, if you're shopping at Walmart, we want you to shop at King Soopers because then it will come back to us.
Very,
100%.
You
So-
can use it in tires.
just buy a lot of tires.
So we wanted to come to you all and just say, what questions do you have? And then how can we best support you all with updates as EPR rolls out? It is nebulous in a lot of ways. We don't know exactly what we're gonna get per household for education and outreach yet, but we will soon. How do we best, keep you all in the loop, come back and communicate to you all?
So I'm not hearing this is costing taxpayers any money. It is in a roundabout way, but it's not anything with Erie raising taxes or doing anything. And so it feels like it's kind of like autopilot. We get money from the state, we could do outreach, we can help educate. And it either grows into what that circular diagram is and then we all get the benefit, or somewhere it doesn't. But there's really isn't much for us to do, right, as elected individuals?
right, yeah, I think as the knob turns, we'll see more from this. And I think one reason we wanted to tell you all is this is sort of our role as education and outreach. Hopefully, at least a portion of the residents also watch these study sessions, and we can kind of spread the word that
Sure.
this is something, though not fully enacted, you can begin those conversations with your HOA, with your waste hauler, to say, hey, I'm paying for recycling on my bill. Hopefully by the end of 2026, I shouldn't be. But we're all gonna have to kind of advocate for that, either individually or collectively.
So as a town, we haven't reached out to the 5 haulers to see if they're participating or?
We have not, that's where Circular Action Alliance has come in, so we've provided them with the names of all of the haulers because some are throughout the state, some are more unique to this region, and they've been in contact with everyone, but that's something where we kind of are letting them handle it since that's not our role specifically.
Yeah, and so mine's done by our HOA and so I went to the HOA budget and I saw what they're paying for the HOA and I divided it by the number of houses to figure out what I'm paying, right? So it was about $15 a month for that, but it doesn't break it down on recycle and otherwise, so they didn't, can't see that. But yeah, so I was like doing some investigation to try and figure it out.
Yeah, I did the same thing. And I cited Vista Points numbers, which is $12.39 a month. And that's for 96 recycling, 96 gallon solid waste. And then for another 28, and I can get a second recycling can, so I've got 2 96 gallons. And then 2 96 gallon trash, but I hardly ever use them.
Do they collect every other week or every week?
Recycling's every other.
Every other?
Yeah.
And then for Country Meadows, it was a little more, it's $15.99 a month. That's for a 96 and a 96.
Maybe it would be helpful, I don't know if you guys have the capacity to do this, but to get a matrix of all the
Yeah.
different HOAs and what they're paying. Is that, is that public? I
Trying
mean,
to do that. That's harder to do than you think.
I'll pull up. In the Highlands, we don't have an HOA. We have a metro district that has covenant control. They contract out with, I think, Waste Connections and One Way or Authorized Hauler. Is there another one or is it just those two? I'm trying to think.
I think it's just those two. I mean,
Yeah.
anybody's authorized, but those are the ones where they've
Yeah, they've negotiated
group
price,
rates as
yeah.
opposed to contracted out.
Yeah, so I'm.
Because the contract's still with the individual.
Right. So I'm using One Way currently. So mine's $18 every quarter, but they do weekly recycling pickup. So
Every
Oh,
quarter.
$18 just for the recycling, yeah.
Oh, for the recycling.
yeah, for recycling. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Do you know what you pay total?
Does your break up
Um,
96?
It's $63 a quarter.
Yeah.
Well, another part with these budgets is we don't know if that includes, trash pickup from the
Yeah,
parks.
that's, both of them weekly, 96 gallon.
Yeah.
And we did
I only put mine out.
have interviews with a few HOAs last 2023, 2024, 24. 24. It all runs together. And there was a range of price from the folks we spoke to as well, and then speaking to residents informally. Some knew, some didn't. There's a whole range for the same services with the same hauler from like $10 to $48. So it's very murky.
this would be good to know somehow.
Yes.
I mean, the boards of the HOAs can certainly tell if they wanted to share that information.
We're all ears.
Even as I live in Old Town, I don't have an HOA, and my hauler, I called them up and I said, what proportion is recycling? And they basically refused to disclose that.
Well, they're not gonna disclose it now.
That was interesting, because I negotiated and I said, okay, can you send me an invoice? And they said, no, we're just gonna charge you that.
They asked you to shop around, right? They asked you
Yes,
to reach out to the
yeah, actually,
hauler.
I called them up and I said, what's the best rate you can give me? They said, this is the rate. I said, okay. And then I called their competition and I said, what's the best rate you can give me? And they gave me a quote. And I called them back up and I said, your competition will do this. And they said, oh, well then in that case, we can do this. But at that rate, we won't send you an invoice. So there's gonna take some work, probably both from the hauling folks as well from the consumers to see this really succeed. So it's good to start talking about it now. fully, 3 years after its adoption by the state. It's finally getting off the ground, and it's gonna be up to folks like us to see this be successful. In Erie, where you only have 11% of residents who don't currently have curbside recycling, that's exciting for that small segment of our population. But statewide, especially you go into the high country, start looking at small towns out east on the western slope, recycling is not currently available to those folks. And that's gonna be the really long-term benefit to the state, is to see universal recycling opportunities for everyone.
And so part of the EPR rollout is also collecting these funds and then building new infrastructure and facilities in places where they don't have access today. So obviously, we are very lucky. We can recycle many items, and the hard to recycle items can go down the street to Charm or Household Hazardous Waste in Boulder County or Weld County, but much of the state doesn't have access, and so that's a big part of this too.
How many, so part of the rebate program is for backyard composting. How many residents have used that rebate?
Not many.
No, I wanna say two or three. And we did launch these late 2024.
Okay.
So it's still a relatively young rebate program. A lot of the action is on the curbside rebate.
Did, I didn't find it on the website, I just was looking at it now, so I didn't have a chance. Boulder County has got a really good backyard composting program that I attended their lecture several years ago, attended it twice. And it was pretty informative. I think part of doing backyard composting is knowing how to do it and getting through the failures that can sometimes happen. But, those who want to stick with it, that's a good program that they can, if it's still available, they can look into the information that the county has.
Sure.
And maybe that might be something for us to promote more. And that's where, like, for me, I'm running 4 bins, and so I don't use, the curbside is not necessarily appealing to me in a contract.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just thinking about an opportunity of maybe you doing a compost backyard 101 sometime this spring.
watch it completely fail. Open it up as mice. I actually did that. We did a school program, and I did bring my compost into the elementary school one time.
Yeah, my exploration into backyard composting is it's one facet of gardening, but it's like the rest of gardening. It's sort of a labor of love,
Yes.
and
Agreed.
and you're gonna go through the failures. But if you already enjoy gardening, you should definitely explore turning your food scraps into compost. You get free dirt at the end of the day and a small organic chemistry lesson.
Yep.
So we started with the compost giveaway last spring for the first time. And that was really exciting, and the hope is that we can start to build that relationship with compost, because it's such an amazing fuel source for plants and just soil amendment for the soil health, water retention. There's so many benefits. So we are planning to continue on that again this year and continue to build that relationship with the compost.
Yeah, that was a good program. I
Yeah.
utilized it. That was definitely appreciated.
Good.
So
Right, any other, great information and
Yeah, as additional information comes to us and we start to see this ramp up and roll out, we'll continue to provide updates probably in the first Friday report to you all. If something big happens, we're happy to have another short study session on that, but that's kind of our plan going forward to keep you guys up to date on where this goes.
As part of the educational material, do they kind of quantify, the recyclable material, how much energy it saves, what it's used for and stuff like that? Because knowing that gives people a little bit more incentive to do it, right?
I appreciate that suggestion. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to go in different directions with the education and outreach funds, especially with Boulder County and, leading in as a collaboration with other local municipalities. So we'll take that into consideration for sure. Like aluminum can is just a no-brainer, right? 95% of the energy to make a new one is saved when you recycle it. They don't belong in trash cans, right? That's money right there. So we'll definitely try to lean into that.
I know back east, when I lived back there, they charged, 5 cents per can and whatnot to get people to recycle. And it's great here that people don't need that, right? And they don't get charged that and don't need it, and they naturally, throw it in the recyclable, at least hopefully for the most part. Where I don't see it is whenever I go on a mountain ski resort trip, they don't have them in the hotels and stuff like that. That seems like low hanging fruit.
Those communities don't really have access to recycling. There's not a recycling facility in close enough proximity, and hopefully in the long term, this will facilitate that statewide recycling.
Yeah, I hope so, because it is frustrating. It's like, okay, we have this big bag of, cans and bottles. What do we do with it? There's nothing to do with it. It's like, okay, do I bring it home and put it in put it in throw it in the back of my truck and just take it home with me?
Yeah, I experienced that when I moved from when I moved from Boulder, where I went to college, and I moved to Central Wyoming, and I'm like, okay, how do I recycle? And the simple answer was, you don't.
Wow.
And it was a real culture shock of, wow, this all just has to go to a landfill because there's not resources here.
That's crazy.
So we just have a last slide. Again, we'll continue to monitor, communicate, and participate in the EPR rollout. Emma's been spending a lot of time listening in on these very long webinars to discuss all the details of the plan that was just recently adopted, and then moving into these next phases. The 2028 is institutions and schools, and then businesses are in by the end 2030. So you're gonna see some changes in this space, and I would just ask, if you all see communication and you have questions, reach out to us. We are always happy to talk trash. We spend a lot of time in this space and talking with a lot of residents. We're always trying to expand the opportunities at the Erie Recycling Center, and always happy to talk with HOAs, work with haulers, opportunities like that. So please just let us know.
So can we prepare like a cheat sheet of questions for residents to ask their HOA or haulers?
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's on the website.
We were working on some website communication now, working with the communications team, but that's a really good point of, we could have just a script of, hello.
Yeah.
That might be a good question for Circular Action Alliance too, which kind of, if you wanna scroll to the last one. There's lots of emails for specific questions too. So if it's something about Erie, we're more than happy to take a go at it. If it's a state level, like program plan specific question, that's their email. And then for Circular Action Alliance, which is more of the producers, higher level implementation, you can reach out to them directly there as well.
I love that suggestion.
Yeah.
How many, probably don't know this answer, how many HOA management companies or service neighborhoods in Erie?
It's been a while since I've looked at the HOA list on the town website. I know there is some redundancy, but we can do that research and get back to you.
There's a handful.
I mean, has anyone tried to reach out and go the route of trying to get the management companies to discuss this with the haulers?
Not that we're aware of, but that could be one way to go about it too, especially if they're managing multiple properties in town.
Yeah, but MSI handles both of both of these two properties. So,
There are in a few.
yeah, there are definitely a few.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I think the hard part is when we've reached out to HOAs and management companies in the past, in the last few years, just trying to get numbers on what people pay for their services and what their services look like, we didn't have a lot of success. I think we ended up talking with 5 HOAs. And the rest, we reached out to half a dozen times. We just weren't able to connect with them. But this is a different conversation, right? Like, this is money. This is reimbursements. So we'll look into that and see, who to maybe at least initially reach out to, get some information from them on what would be helpful, and work on our website materials too. It's tough because it's really being implemented by the state, but it's also an opportunity that we really feel like we need to communicate to our residents and to you all. You know, it would be unfortunate if someone didn't know about this and wasn't able to take advantage of free recycling or new recycling at their home if they don't have it now.
So when you leave a message, say you will get money and they'll return your.
Would you like some extra money this month? Call us back.
Pass.
A new strategy. We haven't done that yet, so it's worth a shot. Great.
Okay, let's move on to our second and last agenda item tonight, and that's 2026-68, the Resilience Action Plan and Next Steps.
Thank you. So yes, we are here to talk about the Resilience Action Plan, or RAP, more acronyms. And this is a check-in with you all. So it is myself and Emma again, but I also want to introduce some of our students. So we have Adam the Hat, who is part of developing this first plan. And then we have Tanya and Anna, who are new students working with us on the next phase of implementation and exploring more. So thank you so much for being here. We also have, if you don't know, Karen Winkler. She's the chair of our Sustainability Advisory Board, who is always ready to support. So presentation overview. So our hope is to go into just a high-level summary of what the Resilience Action Plan is, moving into this next phase of implementation, what that looks like. We want to get your all's feedback on, what changes you may like to see, what questions you may have, and then next steps in moving into this next phase with students.
Can I ask one question before you proceed?
Yeah.
So we saw this in the council and you presented before and it was on the agenda. Do you have any background why it was removed from the agenda? Why
Yes.
are we doing this again?
One of the concerns I think raised by Councilmember O'Connor was to what extent would this increase the cost of construction of new homes? And we pulled together some information that's in the packet showing there's conflicting information out there, whether it would increase the cost or actually reduce the cost. One of the things we wanted to say tonight, the Resilience Action Plan doesn't directly require anything. It's a guiding document. So it's not in itself going to increase the cost. It would be up to council to adopt implementing regulations that may or may not address that particular issue. The energy code update is an area where we would specifically explore that. And so we wanted to bring it back to inquire, are there specific things in the Resilience Action Plan that council had a concern about? And if not, then we would bring it back to you for formal adoption.
So this is a delta between the last one and just to answer this one question. Plus get acceptance.
I think any questions, right? Since we didn't go through it yet, I think this is a chance for us to ask any questions you may
Okay,
have.
okay.
But not just the one that Councilmember O'Connor asked, but any question.
Yeah, we'd put it on consent in November, and there was enough questions that were like, you know what, let's wait till the new year when we have some additional time for a study session and kind of have a conversation, get input from council before we move, into implementation.
We're also excited to share with you more about the implementation piece. Excited to have a new cohort of students working with us. We'll miss Adam dearly and his colleagues. But resilience is becoming more and more important with every big event and the day-to-day as well. So it's also just a good check-in with all of you. So community resilience is defined by our team as the ability of a community to recover from a disaster or persist sustainably in the face of new ongoing hardship. And I just wanted to remind you all that really pays for itself. So $1 invested, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, has $13 realized through avoided future impacts and economic loss and infrastructure rebuilding. And it's an important part for us to really lean into that financial piece, right? We know these events are coming. We know that they have impact. They've impacted our neighbors significantly over the last decade, and really trying to boost that resilience piece for Erie, where we can, is really the goal of this plan in the next phase.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, we started with the students in the development of this plan with a vulnerability assessment. And they looked at air quality, drought, extreme heat, flooding, wildfires, and social vulnerability as areas where Erie specifically might experience events in the future. And then they also looked at regional and other plans as well to help inform them as we went into development. Then again, as we went into the summer, there was a lot of community-facing engagement, starting at our Arbor Earth Day event, Town Fair, several farmers markets, and then Erie Fest. We also conducted interviews with staff, partners, some of you all as well, just to help inform the plan and root it in Erie. And all of this led to the development of 3 main chapters: resilient infrastructure, land management, and community. And within each chapter, there's context of things that Erie's already doing that just hasn't been tied to resilience formally yet. Some outlined goals, potential partners, things like that, to help inform these strategies as we look towards ways of implementation or anything along those lines.
So some of the questions raised, Malcolm has already mentioned, but just a reminder, this plan, these strategies that are listed are merely suggestions to explore further, not mandates, and really just ultimately intended to increase that resiliency in Erie. And some of the concerns specifically that were raised were around the Unified Development Code. The only piece that kind of calls the UDC out is the agrivoltaics piece. And I just wanted to mention that because agrivoltaics really would not be a mandate, they would merely be something that we would streamline and make an easier permitting process to incorporate those. And they are an economic driver for a community because they create a second revenue source for farmers, adding that solar energy creation. They also increase the resilience of farmland. Many crops really enjoy being under the shade of agrivoltaic panels. And then they also reduce evaporative loss, so reducing the need for irrigation, really increasing resilience with hail events, extreme rain events. There's a lot of co-benefits to agrivoltaics specifically. And then as Malcolm mentioned, just that cost to new development piece, it's a much larger conversation that will come to you all in the end of March for our first study session. And it's something, you all really have the authority, you are the ones that make those decisions on any update to code specific to new development, and especially that energy code update.
And if you're not familiar with agrivoltaics, it's the pairing of solar panels with a crop or livestock, so they exist together on one space.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
So we just wanted to ask you all, what questions do you have? We have the ability to adjust this plan. It is a new space for Erie, and we really want it to speak for Erie. We want it to be something that you all are proud of and want to share, and really have the ability to adapt it as you see fit. So that's really what brought us here to talk with you all tonight.
I have a question about electrification requirements. I get the macro reason to get there. I also know that there are chefs that like natural gas to cook on. So talk a little bit about what, there's a document in here for economics, but simplify that for everybody, right? And why would the town go down a path where possibly we would change our code to mandate, okay, a new home has to have 100% electric? I don't think we would ever go back and say, hey, if you own a home by X date, you have to remove gas appliances, right? But just talk macro, big picture.
First, in the context of the Resilience Action Plan, I think exploring the space is important so we can make an informed decision if we come to that point in the future. And resilience, air quality, those sorts of things, efficiency is a piece of it, but another piece is economics, is feasibility, and all of those should come into play when we get to that point. But the way things are trending, as the cost of air source heat pumps continues to go down and they become more efficient. And water heaters aren't there yet, but we can reasonably foresee that they will continue to be, you know, more and more efficient where they can directly compete with a natural gas water heater. If you're building a new home, that's a lot of infrastructure to run a natural gas line for just a cooking appliance, if you're not using it for other appliances in your home. And induction cooktop heating has really changed the game. If your choice is the old coil stove or a gas stove, yeah, gas stove much better. If your choice is between the gas stove and an induction cooktop, I don't think it's that big of a difference. You have very responsive heating and cooling. That's always the problem is you turn the knob on the coil and your food continues to do whatever it was doing for quite a while. And that's the real advantage of gas. So I think we'll see that gap narrow. And then when we look at overall cost of homes, by having a fully electrified home, your home is somewhat future-proofed. This is the direction we will go.
Sure.
And my home is 150 years old. And let me tell you, retrofitting this stuff is oftentimes completely infeasible. So as a community that's growing quickly, and we're building a lot of new homes, I think it's a space at least worth exploring, making those homes as modern as possible for the folks that live in those houses 150 years from now.
So in that scenario, it would be, hey, new development, we're not even running gas lines in.
Potentially. There are neighborhoods already along the Front Range that have been built that way.
By
Including
choice
Erie
or
Commons. They decided to go all electric because they figured out they could use the space more efficiently, didn't have to have the separation between gas lines and the other utility lines.
Oh, I
So
didn't
they
know
could
that.
actually
You
get
type
more.
of wee cottages.
Wee cottages,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all electric.
Yeah, natural gas requires a pretty wide easement. You can't lay things right next to the natural gas line. So then it becomes also just a land use question of is it worth dedicating this 10-foot wide strip of land for a natural gas line if all you're doing is running just your stove.
Right, and do you see Erie or any municipality mandating this, or do you see this more of an issue of state importance, and the state would actually go down that path?
There's been a handful of municipalities in the state that have adopted nearly all electric codes. They have some exceptions, such as commercial cooking, as you mentioned. I see that changing with technology for sure. But Crested Butte's been successful. Lafayette also adopted an all-electric code last year, I believe.
Oh.
So it's happening. Boulder is pretty darn close to that as well. So it's coming, but I think within the context of this resilience plan,
Yeah,
we have to make sure any decision or movement like that is equitable.
Yeah.
And there's both sides of the coin, right? I was out of power for 3 out of 4 days in the last power outage in December, and I have an old gas stove, and I was using that to cook, right? And I think that it's an interesting space, and we really have to think about who's being impacted. But I think with new development, it's a very different conversation. They're very tight homes. It's from the financial perspective, avoiding that gas infrastructure, all electric building is very cost competitive, if not savings in all situations. And so there's a lot of pieces to talk about, and that's a conversation you all will have coming in March and decisions to be made from your seats. But we also don't want to abandon folks, that the gas lines as we move to all electric, that's going to increase the cost of the gas lines and maintaining those systems. Where is that conversation and abandoning people on those systems? I mean, there's a lot of pieces to think about.
yes.
But in the new development space, it's much more clear as far as the cost advantage, and especially when you're avoiding new gas infrastructure.
And so talk about March, what is happening in March, so everybody knows.
So in the end of March, the planning department and building division will all be coming to you all to have a conversation about the different energy code adoption options that are available. It's an interesting space because the state has developed the low energy and carbon code. And there's a time constraint now. So the state has come in to say that here we've established our new kind of code
Yeah.
that we're recommending. And if you all don't adopt code before, I believe it's end of July this year, that's going to be the base. And so if there's any new code adoption that's done at the municipal level, that will
They have
be
to be
automatically adopted by municipalities. So there's that piece of it. There's also a Metro Code cohort that's been adopted that has some changes from the state code that's been adopted. And then there's the standard 2024 International Energy Conservation Code as well.
Yeah.
And so that'll be a really robust conversation brought to you all about those different options, what those look like, and what the town is specifically recommending from staff perspective.
Yeah.
And then you all are, in the hot seats to really make those decisions. What makes sense from your perspective and for the town of Erie.
And that's why I think the work you are all doing is so important to help inform us, or at least that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
It's a
because-
piece.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
not, it's not the whole picture, but it's a critical component.
right. Yeah. Most of us in our day worlds, right, we don't live in this space, so how you articulate it and help us learn, I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
And how do we, as we learn, right, I'm hopeful our community will also learn, right? Because whatever we do, it will affect people in the future, probably less so people that are already here, but certainly people in the future.
Yeah, one of the things, I go back to is, as an electric car owner, as technology changes, hopefully it's easier for us to have a battery backup. We have a battery, an amazingly
Huge battery.
big battery that's expensive sitting in our driveways. And when the power goes out, I would imagine many of you are not set up yet to be able to plug into that battery.
Correct.
Right? And so I could see things like that changing pretty quickly over the next few years where we say, okay, cool. We're not worried about power outages because I can run my Ford Lightning for 4 days and I'll just triage the systems that are on that battery based on what I need. My refrigerator, I want to be able to use my stove, my heater, whatever that looks like. And so it's an evolving space. And again, we don't want to leave people behind. We want to make sure that, again, from that resilience perspective, we're thinking about these people that are already being impacted in many ways in our community.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Great conversation. All right, other thoughts?
So on this, this draft, it's, let's see, it's, the plan is designed for easy navigation via the clickable sections within the table of contents. So this version
Doesn't click.
doesn't click.
Whenever we load it into Legistar, it takes away the clicking capability for whatever reason.
Okay.
So once again, we can send you all a
Yeah.
version
Clickable.
with clickable links.
I think one of the reasons we're changing the software for the agenda system is
Okay.
things like that.
Because I wanted to be able to go through this and click some of these links, because I was just checking some links, and I noticed that the EPA, the USGS, and the FEMA links, if you could just copy and paste them, you get a 404 error, they're no longer there.
That's not a surprise. Okay.
We will.
Yeah, we'll update
We'll
those.
Oh,
double check.
But just, the plan is supposed to be designed to be clickable, and referencing these links, they're not there.
EPA and what was the other one?
It seemed to be all the federal ones,
Oh, the federal, yeah.
yeah, so far that I found.
That's a theme. We'll look into that.
I figured it was, but I wanted to double check that too, so I checked all three, and not every single one, but.
A lot of those resources have been pulled onto private sites, so we can find where those private sites are.
Utilize state resources as well as nonprofit resources that have similar services to what, say, FEMA used to.
Okay. So I guess as this moves towards being a final, how do we create a plan that's so based on clicking on other links, not kind of fall apart when these sites might go away or addresses change?
Yeah, let us look at what is active and what's not. We'll see if there's comparables that still are giving similar information. And then we can send you all a truly clickable version.
Sure.
Again, with those updates.
But as this plan would say last, what, 2 to 5 years before being revisited?
Yeah, I think this action plan, any sort of plan adopted by the town is gonna need fairly regular, just,
Maintenance.
yeah, you gotta go through it and say, hey, is this still relevant? Is there, what in this is now complete and no longer needs to be goals? What situations and technologies have changed that didn't exist in November of 2025? And do all these links still actually go somewhere?
And within this plan, we have it pulled out to be more nimble, so there isn't a specific updating timeline called out. So that way, if we go through these strategies and we decide that we need to do more quickly, we can work to update it sooner. If it's more of a guide as we look at all the different avenues we could go down, we don't need to update it as often. Aside from links and resources, it can be a little more flexible too.
Okay. And on the, so I did a number of, just observations or questions, and it may just make more sense to just email them or sit down and go over them.
Yeah.
But towards the, I think it was the community section, it doesn't, unless I missed it, it doesn't seem to go over economic recovery for businesses or economic recovery for, recovery for residents. The beginning of the plan seems to be focused on disasters and what's happening around us, but how does a plan like this help businesses and residents recover from one of these disasters? Strategies, goals, how could that be written into this plan, or is there a different place for it?
Yeah, do you recall any specific?
Business.
Yeah. I'm looking at Adam.
A lot of resilience is to try to minimize where possible the impacts of these reasonably foreseeable events. And so resiliency is less about recovery and more so upfront preparation so that the effects are less drastic.
Okay.
Is kind of the big picture goal. It's hard to plan recovery efforts until you know exactly what you're up against. Beyond the very broad things that happen, with say FEMA and whatnot, where they're like, all right, we have a pot of money and we're gonna use it when we need it, type of a thing.
Okay.
But obviously with organizations like that regularly face hurricanes and wildfires, et cetera, they do know broadly what resources they're gonna need. From a town level, obviously we're gonna rely on those larger entities and when disasters do occur. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for us to try to adopt things, in-house. When we're not gonna experience these things with any regularity. It's much more, what can we do? What systems can we safeguard? How can we be prepared and have evacuation routes in the case of wildfires? What can we do with our town facilities for perhaps exploring resilience hubs in cases of, if there's extreme temperature events and Excel starts telling everybody you can't run your air conditioner during the heat of the day? Can we have places people can go and avoid heat stroke and things like that? It's a smaller community level sort of approach, and this is the beginning.
Sure.
Is kind of how I see it.
But I think you raise a good point, though. Really calling out what are the resources in the community. So the chamber, the Erie business groups, to really lean in and be able to connect those dots when events do happen. I think that we can definitely lean into that space a little bit. Of course, our economic development partners at the town would also be experts in that space, more so than we are. But I think we could at least establish some relationships and have that incorporated. I know we talk a lot about partners in the plan, because part of it, when we look at these plans, there's already so much that's happening. So sometimes it's just documenting it and seeing, okay, are there gaps? Where are those gaps? And then how do we connect the dots of the resources that are available? Erie's very connected. People already have those relationships, and resilience is really about highlighting those relationships. and trying to identify like, oh, well, you all are doing this, furniture estate program, talking to Lou Miller. And how do we get the word out so more people know about that? That's just one simple example, not for an extreme heat event, but it's an example of those pathways and connections that make us more resilient when there are, more threatening events. So I appreciate that comment, and we can definitely look to see how we can incorporate more business strategies and at least identifying again some of those partners.
And we do have a higher level goal that I was able to find quickly in here about businesses and residents. With ideas, tools, and finances to become more inclusive, environmentally responsible, and resilient. And one of those strategies that's outlined is to support sustainability-related workshops for businesses so that they can learn a little bit more about how to improve their efficiency and lower cost with town rebates and other initiatives. So that could also be, it could become more specific with additional research and like more tailoring, but it's a starting place that's called out too.
Regarding the electrification, it had me thinking, what happens if we lose power, and how do those residents heat their home in the winter?
Your natural gas furnace doesn't work without power either.
But your gas fireplace would.
You sure?
It doesn't have an electric starter.
No, most of them don't.
I did spend 4 or 5 days blizzard outside of Loveland where we hung blankets on the doorways of the kitchen, and everybody lived in the kitchen for like 5 days, and we heated the house with the gas oven. Probably not a great idea given what we know about carbon monoxide. We did live.
Our attorney just turned 3 different shades. She was like, we don't endorse that.
That was the late 1980s. That was the late 1980s. The fact is, if you have widespread power outages during extreme weather events, that's going to be very challenging, whether you live in an all-electric home or not.
Sure.
That's
what Eric had
absolutely
said earlier about those of us that have electric cars, it's a massive power supply just sitting, and finding the way to make that easy to tap into so you can run your refrigerator or space heater or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that recent power outage, it's like, what?
Go live in my truck, right?
Yeah, we need to figure this out. Why does it have to be so complicated?
So that kind of brings up a good point about resilience hubs, and I went to a workshop recently about resilience hubs, DOLA, and just kind of the communities who are doing different things. Everyone seems to be kind of approaching it differently. Louisville is looking, I think it's their rec center, but other communities have smaller, buildings or services that they offer. And I know that after that workshop, I emailed because I was like, oh my gosh, I just learned about this thing. I'm so excited. And you guys were like, yeah, we already know. But I wonder if that is a direction we could move with implementation, because we do have some challenges. The plan recommends the rec center. But we have some challenges. It's, not off the grid. It's not, we don't have what's the word I'm looking for? The things that would provide power.
Batteries, battery backup.
Batteries or generators is the word I could not find. And it's a big facility and some of those things. So I think, for direction and what way we could begin to look that would immediately benefit the community, I think would be really looking at resiliency hubs and building that into the towns, because it would immediately serve all residents. If we have power outages or we have some sort of emergency, it's a resource for getting, needs to the community, because they all know where to come. So I think that could be great for helping us meet the critical infrastructure needs of the town. Also, I was in the Boulder OEM, the Office of Emergency Management meetings after the Marshall Fire in 2022 probably. And kind of all the communities came together and we were just talking about lessons learned and what, I had nothing to say in this meeting, but learned a lot. But talking about recovery from the 2013 flood and the Marshall Fire, and from both of those events, what I think the overall message was your recovery is directly linked to your planning. And so your resilience starts before anything ever happens in the community. And so I feel like this plan is part of that recovery success already. Is we'll be able to meet whatever, because it's impossible to predict Erie will experience a flood or Erie will experience a fire or, you know, a tornado. Who knows? But having like the resilience hubs or battery backup or whatever, the plan can really help us like directly link to that recovery success. So I'm excited about this. I think there's so many things in here that I like, let's do all of it right now. Let's go.
That might be a good segue into the last slide, and then of course, we still have time for discussion if you all have lingering questions. But looking ahead, so we matched with the second group of Masters of the Environment students. Yay! To dive further into the implementation or strategies of this plan. And in our project proposal to the program, we identified a few different focus areas that we could explore, including an HOA resilience engagement workshop series, resilient hub site analysis or additional research within Erie specifically, and or developing an extreme heat community resilience guide informed by this plan as well. So we kicked off last week, I think. So the timing of this conversation was very serendipitous for us. But we'll incorporate any additional feedback, we'll look at those links and what have you, and ideally bring this back for adoption soon. But do you all have any questions about that or anything else that's lingering?
No, I kind of looked at this as kind of like the comp plan, right? It's not binding in any way.
Correct.
Good analogy.
I do worry that people may read something in here and say, you have to do this, where the economics may turn out to be, not feasible at the moment. So I don't know if there's a preamble or something in there that kind of lays it out that this is, it's a vision. Is it aspirational, would you say?
I don't know about aspiration. I mean, a lot of it is may or may not be feasible to implement. A lot of it is just exploration. In the view of establishing a resilience hub, work needs to go in first. Hey, what gaps are there at, say, the ECC? Is that the appropriate location? Would it be better to have a more nebulous network of smaller hubs? What's it going to cost to get that building where we need so it can function in that capacity? And is that an expense the town sees value in? Or is it like, anything can be done with enough money and enough engineers, right? But is that really, the town's priority? And it's really hard to answer that question without doing that exploratory work. And that's a lot of what this plan calls for is explore this and investigate this. So in somewhat aspirational, but only insofar as we aspire to actually implement those things.
So maybe those words you just said so eloquently, maybe
Do you want
that's.
to write that down?
Well, we got
Yeah,
the
it's
recording.
recorded,
Recording.
but maybe
We'll
there's just a
transcribe.
paragraph, right, that says, yes, this is the right direction. And we need to explore to see ultimately what can be done. And in what time frame? Because maybe it can't be done this year, next year, but maybe it could be done 5 years from now or 10 years from now as technology, somebody mentioned heat pumps, right, are getting more efficient, right? So maybe there's a threshold time when all of a sudden the economics of doing it actually makes sense. And no longer is it a question of should we do this, but the economics are pulling you in that direction.
Is there a sense of what the ECC would need? And I'm asking this because we had a conversation recently about expanding the ECC.
So the ECC, this is something that's on Chad Alexander's, our facility manager's radar. He's been exploring how to make the ECC more resilient in the face of power outages and extreme events. it's something from our sustainability lens. We're advocating for what we call like a blue sky location as well. So it's something where the community goes all the time, right? Because that's really what's been established as the most successful resilience hub, is a place where people already have that relationship, they're already going there, which is also why the ECC makes a great location to begin with. But there's also components that would be challenging. So you need to have a group of people that are using that facility, have more control over that facility, are thinking about additional programming, where the ECC is really staff run, right? Like it's not a place where, you know, there's rules as far as timing, you know, there's different things to think about. And so it's definitely something Chad's working on, we're supporting from the periphery. We're looking at what would geothermal look like there, how much would it cost? It's really not a realistic option right now, but it might be in the future. You know, he's looking at increasing the efficiency all the time, moving towards electric equipment where possible versus gas, especially as it's aging and needs to be replaced. So that's happening, and hopefully that answers your question. But we're also thinking about this more as distributed hubs too. So how do we take an HOA club center or whatever that looks like, and we start to get folks thinking about in a workshop at that HOA, well, who has what? Like, what happens if we lose power for a couple of days? You know, I have this backup generator, or my father-in-law lives with us and he needs oxygen. We're gonna need to have access to this. Or we have a year's worth of flour in the basement. We can start building on our solar oven in the backyard. Like, it's those types of relationships and that type of just kind of group think and support that really increases resilience in a community. So we're also thinking about that too. Right? So it might not be a place where, you know, yes, it's a formal place, we can have 1,000 people go in the case of emergency. It might be distributed hubs and more of a mentality of, hey, like what happens when we need to rely on each other? What are those networks within our community and how can we lean on one another and who has what available? And that leans into this next phase, this digging into implementation, having more of these conversations, doing more of these workshops, having, you know, looking at what are other resilience, are there churches in the community that would be interested in this, that already have backup generators, right? That are already doing community programming, that would already be a really good fit for expanding that a little bit to make it more of a destination in the case of an extreme heat event or something like that. So I hope that helps. The community center is an amazing opportunity, but we can also go a little bit beyond that too.
Sure, I mean, it almost makes sense to see what High Plains Library District
Yeah,
would
that's
be
great.
interested in, because that's all centrally located anyway.
Mhm.
But separate buildings, so in case something happens to one, you still have the other.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
All right, other questions, suggestions?
It's not a question, but my opinion is same as the last presentation. We should go ahead with this, and there's so many things that are thought about for future, so. Thumbs up.
Yeah, and I'll close it out. I just, the intro, just what you said made a lot of sense, and it may be captured in there. But if it isn't, then I encourage you to take another look at it before it comes back to us for approval.
Excellent.
So what I'm hearing is we'll incorporate your feedback. We'll work with you separately, Councillor O'Connor, on just those links and different suggestions you might have. We'll look at the economic development piece. We'll work on an intro. We'll send an updated version to you all for feedback, and then we'll bring it back to this meeting for adoption, if that works.
Sounds good. Maybe on the consent
Yeah, it'll probably
agenda,
come back
just
on the
depending, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
Thank you all. And with that, we adjourn this meeting.